Seeing no other requests for public comment, we'll close the public comment period. And if we're ready, we'll move on to the reordered agenda for the work session, which is presentation for the Laramie Joint Climate Action Planning Task Force letter of support. And call on City Manager for introduction and background. All right.
Sure, Mayor, I'd be happy to. And I'm guessing maybe the City Manager's office login is Darren Parkin. But Darren Parkin, as you know, is our Natural Resource Manager here at the city, working in the City Manager's office. I know you all know Darren. Nancy, he's in the attendee room, and we can let him in to the panel. We also have some other folks with us tonight that Darren will introduce to you, working in the sphere of natural resources protection and lowering our emissions, and generally in the sphere of environmental awareness and stewardship. So with that, I will let Darren step in and kind of take you through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you very much. Darren, whenever you're ready.
Darren, if you could just accept the request to be a panelist.
Nancy, can you add Jared O'Brien to the panelists as well, please?
Darren, we've got you now.
All right. Good evening, Mayor.
Jared, we have you now. Thank you, Mary Grace, for getting that taken care of. Okay. So whoever's ready, I'll start with you, Mr. Parkin. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm probably just going to turn this right over to Mary Grace and the coalition. A lot of familiar faces to most of you, and they have went to, and they'll explain this, they've went to Environmental Advisory Committee with this request and presentation. They've also been to the county commissioners with this request and presentation, and now it's City Council's turn. So I think their presentation is pretty much going to be self-explanatory, and I'll let them go until it's my turn to speak a little bit later.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. Excited to be here with everybody tonight. For those of you I don't know, I am Mary Grace Bedwell. I'm a member of the Environmental Advisory Committee. I've been a member of the task force since its inception, and then I've been on Environmental Advisory Committee since October of 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago. Time flies. It's been great. So, and with me tonight is Jared O'Brien, and I'll let him kick off the presentation. And Nancy, am I able to share, or do I need permission?
I'll have to give you permission. I can do that here.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Does that look good to everybody? Cool. All right. Go ahead. Take it away, Jared.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary Grace, and good evening to everybody. So for those that you don't know, my name is Jared O'Brien. I'm currently the co-community organizer for the Alliance for Renewable Energy. I've been doing that for almost a year now. And I'm also a student at UW majoring in mathematics with double minors in sustainability and energy resource management. So jumping right into things, as you know, there's been like a strong multi-year history of this kind of emissions reduction work, much of which has led to the City of Laramie and community partners. And tonight, I'll just give a brief share to know how we've come to this point in time. So beginning in October 2018, community members of Laramie formed the Alliance for Renewable Energy, or ARE, whose mission was and continues to be transitioning our communities to renewable energy based on scientific data, economic fairness, public education, and support. So being cognizant of the fact that students have a substantial impact within our community, we partnered with the Haub School of Environmental and Natural Resources during the spring of 2019, during which students in the campus sustainability course began creating Laramie's first baseline emissions inventory calculator. This was later finished and presented to the city towards the end of the summer by Xanthe York. Next slide, please. So having established a baseline, the next step was to figure out how to decrease our carbon footprint as a community. To do so, members of ARE consulted research from the 100 Resilient Cities project and funding opportunities provided by Rocky Mountain Power's Blue Sky grant. More on that later, but with the assistance from students in the campus sustainability course and ICLEI, a series of presentations spanning the late 2019 and early 2020 was given to the Laramie and Albany County Environmental Advisory Committee, city staff, and city council. This also kind of led to Laramie becoming a member of ICLEI to kind of help use their resources in informing how do we go about this process. Next slide, please. So then these presentations helped inform a draft municipal emissions reduction plan and inform a community of available resources. And this kind of all culminated into that main event in May 2020, where City Council unanimously adopted the Carbon Neutral by 2050 resolution. And this was the first of its kind in all of Wyoming. So just a great achievement overall for our community and our surrounding communities. Having previously mentioned the Blue Sky Grant, the City of Laramie also utilized this funding opportunity to submit applications for rooftop photovoltaic solar on the rec center. Next slide, please. So then the third collaborative project occurred during the spring of 2021, where students, sorry, I'm a little ahead of myself. Yeah, I apologize. The third collaborative project occurred during the spring of 2021, where students evaluated local incentives for solar and explored the possibility of a joint UW and city climate action partnership. And of course, previous to that, the sort of grant process or the process of getting that installation done on the rec center was completed. City of Laramie broke ground during the sort of later in 2020. And then we began with this project in the spring of 2021, which I was a member of. And it was amazing because we reached out to a lot of different stakeholders across this, our community and received letters of support for essentially a joint sort of venture in emissions reduction. And we really received letters from the AC, ASUW, UW Sustainability Coalition, and I say ARE because I wasn't a member of it then at that point, and then also the Shepherd Symposium Committee. Next slide, please. So then reviewing that and realizing that you know, it became an apparent need that our community needs not only needs, but would like a long-lasting coalition structure developed from professional relationships to sustain coordinated and strategic emissions reduction efforts in the short and long term. We took a period of synthesis, analysis, and review before we reached out a couple of members of the community and stakeholders to kind of create this joint climate action planning task force, to which our first meeting happened in September 2021. So this kind of brings us to where we are now. And just to review, I want to mention that the three previous projects, those were essentially ARE, City, Laramie City Council, or member stakeholders partnered with students in the Haub School Sustainability course. Those are the only collaborative sustainability projects between the university and the community since 2007, when UW became a charter member of the American College and University Presidents Climate Action Commitment, or ACUPCC. It's a mouthful, I know. But yeah, thank you very much. And I'll hand it over to Mary Grace to kind of explain like, what is this task force, what do we do, and what we're asking.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. That's a great setup and also reminds us that a lot of the work that has been done by the city. So really pushes us forward and realizes or helps us realize why the partnership between the three entities might be a good idea and is a good idea in our opinion. So as a refresher, the sort of who, what, why of the coalition, we're a group of representatives from the city, county, and the University of Wyoming that organize thanks to the efforts of the Campus Sustainability Course, ARE, and the Campus Sustainability Coalition, like Jared said. We're made up of students and professors, elected and appointed officials, University of Wyoming staff, and community members. And it's really been a great meeting of the minds from a lot of different corners of our community and our constituencies. We established with the intention of having recommendations ready to present for the Shepherd Symposium of this year, which we were able to do. And before I talk about the recommendations, I do want to talk about the criteria that we used to get to them. And you can see our goals on this slide. And before I quickly hop over to our criteria, just want to take a note for these. So develop a lasting coalition structure, explore and evaluate projects and strategies that engage with decision makers and support those priority recommendations, and coordinate the leverage and the shared assets that we have. So really seeing where we can do what we can do together that we can't do separately. So talking a little bit about the criteria, again, what can we do together that we can't do alone? What will reduce our emissions using concrete and feasible strategies, and also proven technologies with cost savings, and what will be robust and enduring while also addressing this admittedly really urgent need for climate action and emissions reduction in our community. So this is a pretty lofty goal, but the 9 recommendations that we do bring forward today meet the criteria that we set forth and our overall goals. And we did begin with nearly 90 different ideas, and we combined them and chipped them away to get to where we are today. So with all that said and all that set up, let's dive in. These are on the recommendations 1-pager as well that's on the agenda if anybody would like to follow along. So beginning with our operational actions, we recommend pursuing large-scale solar using bulk buys and a community-based approach, sort of basing that on models that I know that folks at the city are, some folks at the city are familiar with, that we have here in our state. We also propose hybridizing or electrifying fleets across these 3 entities, as well as pursuing a unified compost stream. And we sort of envision that starting more large scale with commercial and businesses, and then moving towards residential composting. And then the last operational action that we recommend is taking a look at the transportation system in Laramie and thinking about how we can build a sustainable system while also including walking and biking infrastructure. So moving into the next sort of grouping, if you're on the 1-pager, the community and citizen action. It's worth noting that at the Shepherd Symposium, we did see a lot of faith and individual action. So we looked at this from the perspective of how can we really elevate that passion into a collective impact. And our recommendations here include pursuing energy audit and loan programs to improve efficiency, both at home and for businesses. And we also hope to draw on programs and models that already exist in our state and beyond. And then we also see value in developing joint messaging and learning opportunities. Things like, you know, seminars, educating people on things that already exist, like the City Waste and Recycling app, lots of things like that. And then finally, in terms of supporting these actions, sort of that next section on the 1-pager, is really where we look at getting the work done. We're recommending standardizing emissions inventories across the 3 entities to track the work being done, and also the return on investment across all parties, which will be critically important. And we also recognize that this joint approach requires joint funding opportunities, and pursuing those together will be incredibly important. And we recommend keeping our coalition going. So as I said before, we aimed for a really iterative process, both internally with our diverse representation and as we took it to the community for feedback. At the Shepherd Symposium, we had over 80 attendees throughout the half-day event, both in person and virtually, and we got a lot of feedback and support from our recommendations. And we began as a task force working to develop these recommendations for the symposium. And now that we've completed the task, we still see a lot of immense value in working together towards implementation on these recommendations. And so before we dive into questions or my ask of you, I'd like to discuss a little bit about where we are and what steps have been taken to get to these goals already. So already all three entities do conduct emissions inventories, just using different calculators. So we're on the right track, but we're not quite there yet. We've also begun pursuing funding jointly, though we have not received any grants at this point. A lot of the legwork has been done to throughout those processes that can help us in future efforts. And now we're looking into opportunities in the Inflation Reduction Act and other federal programs. And then last but not least, like I've said, the coalition is still meeting. We're continuing the work and we're along for the ride to assist in whatever we can as we work towards our next steps. And so this brings me to the why of today. What am I presenting to you for? So today I'm here not only as a member of the coalition, but as a member of your Environmental Advisory Committee, who's had a hand in the development of these recommendations. We as EAC believe that this meets our directive to advise City Council on environmental alternatives relevant to your constituencies. And so the next step here includes presenting to relevant decision makers along this timeline, just based on the calendar. You are the last of the elected entities. It's nothing personal, just the timeline. But with the support of EAC, now the county and hopefully the city will move on towards presenting to the university to really get everybody on the same page about these recommendations and implement moving forward. From our perspective, what the implementation looks like is sort of what you see here. It will look like acknowledging the recommendations, adding them into the day-to-day operations of the city with acknowledgement, commitment, some slight administration and operational adjustments, and continued support of these critical efforts and the efforts of the coalition. It's a lot of information all at once. It's simplified. We're asking you to sign the letter of support that is attached to your agenda tonight. Feel free to make any adjustments or anything that you need. But this is what we've been working on and what signing that letter of support will mean. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm wondering, Nancy, if we can get Dr. Rachel Badoli in the room as well. We have a wealth of knowledge in the audience that's already in the room, but she will also be able to answer a lot of questions in terms of background and process and moving forward from a different perspective. So I can open it to questions for now while we're waiting on her to come in. Oh, sure, there she is.
Hi. Well, thank you for that introduction, Mary Grace, and also for the presentation. And Dr. Badoli, if you'd like to add something to that presentation, then please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I just want to thank Mary Grace and Jared for a fantastic presentation. Jared is a current student, Mary Grace was a student, and they continue to lead in their community, which is really encouraging. Councilor O'Doherty has served in our task force and coalition. I want to thank her as well for her effort and representing the city in that process. And just while I have them here, Darren Parkin and Janine have been absolutely amazing in providing technical support for these efforts over time. So I think I will close by saying that I've heard frequently that this is one of the single most positive partnerships between the city and the university. And I think that's due in no small part due to the students involved. So thank you all for having me here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Appreciate those comments very much. Questions for any of the presenters? Comments or discussion you want to engage in? Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Mary Grace, you talked about some possible ARPA funding. Can you bring me up to speed on the possibility there, what you have done, and if those funds are available for these kind of projects?
I cannot, I'm sure someone else can. Rachel looks like she can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. And I would say we're in sort of the nascent explorations of this. I will share that I worked with County Commissioner Gosar and also in an academic grant to try to fund these projects. So as Mary Grace alluded to, we have some writing in place, which is a great first step. And we are hearing rumblings that the IRA will have funding for this kind of work. One thing that I'm hoping we can do as an academic partner is try to investigate what those funding possibilities will be and bring it to you all to sort of simplify that very dense process. So I think we're just seeing it on our radar as a possibility, but you are absolutely right. We need to do a bit more exploration for how that would actually translate into some of these efforts. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a clarifying question because I think I've heard ARPA and the IRA referenced, and then I'm also wondering, is the infrastructure package in the mix there as well? Because that would also seem like yet another avenue in this nascent stage to be researching and pursuing. Those are sort of three active federal funding pools that intergovernmental agency partnerships seem like they would be well served to pursue. Dr. Italy, if you want to touch on that, please. If you don't have the answers right now, because it's a matter of getting that information together, that's certainly understandable.
Sure thing. I can share that we have been particularly discussing within our Task Force Now coalition, IRA in particular. But I think you're hitting on a really important point that if we are to solidify this partnership, that all of our decision makers can help direct us as a coalition into the kinds of funding opportunities we should be investigating. And ideally, by joining into and supporting this partnership, we can direct city, county, university staff and the coalition to explore these things further. So that was sort of a non-answer, and tossing it back to you all, I think, of like, we will be interested to explore all of those opportunities and where you all see is the best fit.
I appreciate that very much, and I think that's actually appropriate because I'm now going to leverage that non-answer answer into this comment for the council and the staff, which is that we frequently have talked at this council about the need for resources to be directed towards grant research. The county and the city council, the county commissioners and the city council have together discussed a real need to try to pool resources on that, simply because there is so much of it to do that's related to so many things, including this topic tonight. So I think, you know, once again, that's an issue that's presented itself to us as a need. It certainly seems like it could be a full-time position for someone at this point with all of the funding pools that are available to be researched. Do we have any other comments or questions here? Since we have folks here. All right. Any follow-up comments from Dr. Woodlow or Jared or Mary Grace or anything before we move on? Yeah, Councilmember O'Doherty. I think Councilmember O'Doherty is having some audio problems, and I think she's aware of it. So while we're waiting for her to see if she can figure that out, we've had some audio problems tonight.
Okay, I'm back.
Great.
I just thought it'd be a good time to say what the acronyms, because you said the IRA. It would be good to say what those granting organizations or granting pools are instead of just using the acronyms.
Councilor Doherty is not a huge fan of acronyms. I believe ARPA is
American
Rescue Plan Act. American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, which is the oldest of that group. The second, I'm not sure what the acronym for the infrastructure funding bill was.
Inflation Reduction Act.
There's also the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure.
That's the one I'm referencing, Mary Grace, thank you, which is separate from the IRA. So, and I don't know what the acronym for that is, so we'll just call it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Funding Bill, and then the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. Vice Mayor Pierce to the rescue.
Yeah, no, I'm not even going to jump into that. I just want to say I'm certainly in support of us signing off or in reference to this letter. I think it's this letter of support. So I think it's perfectly fine, very well written. I just read it really quickly, and I would say we go ahead and continue our efforts in this area. I do have a question, if I could. Has this group been looped in on all the efforts that the city has been doing all along in the past years? Do you have that inventory? Do you know where we are on electric vehicles and solar and all that type of stuff?
Yes, Vice Mayor, I can take that one and then Rachel can follow up. We're super familiar, and it's not lost on us that a lot of these recommendations do mirror very closely the city's emission reductions plan. A little bit about me, I was an intern for the city when that process was starting, so it has been ingrained into this process in many ways before I am now just a volunteer EAC member. So a lot of the original propositions and ideas that the city was given by the Environmental Advisory Committee and then put into effect were things that inform this. And then we've also been up to date and up to speed with Councilmember O'Doherty, providing lots of updates, which has been great. And it's nice to know that there's a lot going on. And then Mr. Parkin as well.
So perfect. And thank you so much for your effort and the committee's effort as well.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Bringing it back to the central question, which is support of the letter. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I just wanted to say to Vice Mayor Pierce that a lot of that will be covered in Darren's presentation, I believe, what the city's doing separately. Thank you.
Nevertheless, it's good to know that those efforts have been integrated into this portion of tonight's topics before us since the get-go. And I see that, Rachel, you were ready to go again, please.
And I only wanted to thank Vice Mayor Pierce for that comment. Part of our goal with presenting the history was to acknowledge what leaders the city has been on this work, and also to note that really throughout the process that students from the university have been involved in hopefully supporting the city in that work. And now we are very grateful to have the county involved as well. So yes, you all are out ahead, and we are happy to support and hopefully expand that work over time.
Thank you for that comment as well. And I think now is the time where I point something out, which is important, which is that the council has had some policy discussions, and we've done some work with you folks who continue to do a lot of volunteer work, which we really appreciate. Some of the strongest leaders in this effort since the beginning of it have been our individual department heads and individual department people that have gotten really creative and I think appropriately aggressive in pursuing these policy changes and goals in terms of what they can do at that department level to meet these. And that's the way it's going to work, right? It's all going to be these sort of individual areas that are then integrated into an overall plan, and they've been absolutely dedicated to it, and it's been impressive to see. And of course, we continue to support it from that overall policy level. But that, I think that really can't be said enough, and we will be talking about that more, I think, here in just a few minutes. But I think it needs to be emphasized as well. Okay, good. I don't see any other hands popping up. I appreciate the comments and the information that you've shared. I think the general position of the council, insofar as I can tell, is that we are supportive of the letter, of course, and the next steps there. And I encourage you to maybe hang around for the next portion of the presentation in case you have any further information that it may stir in your memory, or if you have questions about it yourself as we go on. With that said, we'll go now to, I believe it may be public comment, actually. No, it is not. We'll move on to the next portion of the work session, so I'll recognize the city manager for a moment.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to, before Rachel jumps off the call, if she's going to, just thank her for all of her collaboration with the city, and in particular, some of the items that we're going to hear more about as we move forward in the presentation. I also would like to introduce Darren Parkin again, and mostly just because I want to celebrate him for a moment too. Darren is, as I said earlier, our natural resources manager, and the variety of tasks in which he is involved and responsible on behalf of the city is very significant and broad, and he does a great job managing all of this with obviously lots of support from other members of staff. But I just wanted to take a moment to tell Darren how much we appreciate the work that he does. He and I actually talk on a regular basis about the need for maybe some more staff assistance in this area as our programs expand and get bigger and bigger. So thank you, Darren, a chance to recognize the yeoman's work that you do here, and I will let you move forward. Councillor Pierce, we're actually going to, in this next part of the presentation, show you everything that's been going on in one place tonight as far as all of this area of work that has been ongoing for a couple years. So this will be the quick and, well, maybe not that quick, but very detailed look at what's been going on at the city.
City manager. And Darren, it's now your time to shine, sir. Let's hear about it.
All right. Good evening again, Honorable Mayor and Council. Clerk, can you start my presentation? And this is just a quick overview of the activities that I've been involved with and what the city has been doing in general. But really, this is just setting the stage for the main event, which is Corinne Sheska, who is come on board and is going to do a great project for us with a graduate research assistantship. And I hope Dr. Badoli stays online here too. I just have a few slides, and then when I'm finished, we'll introduce her and really get her presentation rolling. So with that, I'll just give a kind of an update. Some of this stuff you've seen before, but it's always good to kind of get it back around to everybody, so that you kind of have a comprehensive look at everything that's going on. So the city of Laramie has been fairly committed on this path of emissions reduction. This is just kind of a quick list of a lot of the different activities that we have undergone, and we'll go into most of these in a little more detail as the presentation goes on. Next slide. So we're going to start out with Mountain Towns 2030. Some of you are involved with this directly. Most of you have heard of this. As a refresher, this is basically a coalition of communities, pretty much in the Mountain West, who have similar goals and ideologies and thought processes to undertake climate plans, climate action plans, emissions reduction plans, and we're all kind of on the same path. And so while Mountain Towns 2030 does a lot of different things, the Solutions Project is really the one that the city is involved with. And this is a cohort where we directly communicate with staff members from other communities, Eagle, Colorado, Park City, several communities in Summit County, Colorado, Whitefish, Montana. There's a long list of folks that are at various stages of enacting similar climate goals that the city of Laramie has adopted. And so instead of everybody having to reinvent the wheel and go their own direction, this is really a direct way for peer-to-peer contact and information exchange, where we can really share what's working for us, what's not working, what we have information to offer, what we need information on. So it's a really cool project. The 2023 cohort will start in January and run through June of 2023. And again, kind of a lead into Corinne's work. I think this is something she'll be directly involved with, and it's going to open up a huge amount of information for her and contacts as she works on her GA project. So along the lines of Mountain Towns 2030, I had the opportunity to go to their summit in Breckenridge, Colorado. And I think that's the next slide. And so it was a week-long conference, and it was very interesting. It was very well attended. So, you know, there was a lot going on. A lot of these presenters, there was 3 different, presenters going on at different locations in the community all at once. So you could only take in a small piece of it. But I was kind of asked to give some high points that might be of interest to council, takeaways from that, and might be interest to the folks in this meeting. Not all of these, I think, are going to work for Laramie necessarily. These aren't being presented as suggestions or recommendations. They're just kind of this is what's going on around us. So in no particular order of importance, the first one that various different presenters offered up at this summit were that their communities are decoupling growth goals and from their emissions goals. They have decided that they're going to prioritize their emissions reduction over their GDP and growth and revenue. Again, a lot of these are tourist communities, they're ski towns, they're mountain towns, they're financially better off potentially than Laramie. But that was kind of a theme that I found very interesting that seemed to come up over and over again in this conference. Another one is these mountain towns are wanting to house their workforce locally. Jackson, for instance, has a goal to have 60% of their workforce living in the town of Jackson. They're trying to, that's a big lift, and there's a lot of things that are going to need to happen for that. But for a lot of reasons, not just emissions, but on the emissions side of things, these communities aren't happy with all these cars coming into their communities every day and leaving every day and driving miles and miles and miles back and forth. So there's a huge push to try to get the local workers living locally. And there's affordability issues and a lot of other directions that goes, but that was, I thought, an interesting concept. The third one is something we've talked about here in Laramie, reduction in parking. Some of these communities are purposely taking away parking spaces in downtown areas, reducing parking requirements in new developments or eliminating them altogether. The fourth one is one that was kind of new to me and I thought was very interesting. No natural gas in any new building developments. Denver is basically outlawing natural gas in mid-2023. Most of these summit ski towns along I-70 in Colorado are following suit. Basically, they view natural gas as a transitionary way to get to fully electric. So all new construction, fully electric, no gas, anything. And they want to actually retrofit existing developments as much as possible, taking away natural gas and wood stoves and other things and putting in all electric. Lots of discussion about going into lower income and disadvantaged communities and ways to go in and retrofit those communities to be fully electric. How that can be done, which is not an easy discussion, but they feel that they need to come along because to meet these emissions goals, everybody has to come along to hit these targets. Eagle, Colorado, the next bullet point, was kind of the leader of this, but this is a few others. Some of these communities have adopted extremely aggressive carbon net neutrality goals, and they're not necessarily diving really deep into planning and lengthy code rewrites. Eagle, Colorado just approved a 260 unit development, and they had this wish list, none of which was in code. All electric, EV chargers, all kinds of things in this development that they just basically got developer cooperation voluntarily to build. A lot of these communities are getting that type of cooperation. They are going to rewrite code over time. It's not something they're ignoring, but they're not doing that first. It's more action over planning. Electric vehicle incentives. This one ranges from e-bikes to electric vehicles. The city of Denver started an electric e-bike incentivization program where they have vouchers, where they will give $400 vouchers to buy an electric bicycle from a local bike store, or $1,200 vouchers if you meet income requirements. Their pilot for this, they had 300 vouchers to give out, and they were gone in 22 minutes. So they are funding this, just trying to get people on e-bikes. E-bikes over and over are being viewed as kind of the commuter vehicle of the future. Some people just maybe can't ride a bike or they're a little bit too far away, but e-bikes are really kind of opening that up to where these folks really want their workforce coming to work on e-bikes instead of vehicles. Holy Cross Energy, which has a carbon net neutrality goal of 2030, and they're on the western slope of Colorado, they will give you a free vehicle charger if you buy an EV vehicle. So they will set you up, incentivize that program. And then there's EV group buys. City Fort Collins, for buying or leasing a new electrical vehicles, has facilitated 5 group buys so far. So these are just kind of things that are going on around us, not too far away from us, and pretty neat stuff. The next one, how do you pay for all this stuff? So there was a lot of talk about establishment of climate funds, sustainability funds. They take on different names, but they all basically are for the same thing. It's for how to fund these projects. Some communities are doing it through taxes. Denver voted in for their new climate office in 2021 and a 0.25% sales tax increase. Town of Jackson is looking to go to an 8% sales tax, and a portion of that will go to fund their climate goals. But others, Eagle, Colorado, is using a sustainability fund, which is essentially an investment fund where they're working with banks and they're doing fundraisers. They'll take private investors, donors, and that sustainability fund is really being put in place to try to fast track their climate goals. Excel Energy, the next bullet point down, I thought this one was interesting because they gave a presentation and said, and Excel Energy has a net zero carbon goal by 2050 and an 87% carbon reduction goal by 2030. Excel Energy, which is a regulated utility, kind of made the pitch that our electrical grids are not going to handle this transition. And so if everybody is going to meet these goals, we're going to have to build a lot of infrastructure. And that means a lot more transmission lines, a lot more substations, just a lot more infrastructure in general. And their pitch was, you know, when we come into your communities, you know, we want to be able to get these projects done, you know, and not be kind of held up in red tape. And it's going to be kind of a trade-off between this transition to all electric. You know, we're going to have to upgrade that system. And then the final one, it was just kind of interesting. Some of the projects that are around hydrogen plants are being built by various utilities. Kit Carson Energy, which is in northern New Mexico, actually divested themselves from Rocky Mountain Power. They could not get a renewable energy commitment from Rocky Mountain Power greater than 5%. So they just left them and went 100% solar. And now they're also building hydrogen plants. For their utility, they claim they were able to, after transitioning to primarily solar, they had a 40% reduction in rates to their utilities. They do cover Taos and some wealthy areas, but there are also some very disadvantaged areas in New Mexico that Kit Carson serves. And so they had to be very cognizant of the costs to their members, and they were able to hit that goal. So the other one is kind of interesting. Excel Energy is looking at, there's kind of a flip, right? So in the past, the coal-fired power plants are your primary energy source, and then your renewables are kind of the backup. But that's going to flip now, and so renewables are going to be the primary energy source, and then the coal's going to kind of be on standby in times when the renewables aren't producing. The coal plants will kick back on. That's not always going to be very easy to do or viable. So there's a lot of plans out there to try to get trying to get ways to, when the grid drops or the production into the grid drops, that they can give it a shot of energy and keep everything going. So the coal-fired power plant in Hayden, Colorado is being decommissioned. And so they are working to convert that to a molten salt storage project where I don't pretend to know how that works, but basically molten salt is held at 525 degrees. And basically when that energy is needed, that can flash and produce steam and give them a jolt of electricity. There's also a lot of talk of pumped storage for hydro, where when you have excess energy, you're pumping water up into some elevated area. And then when you need that energy, you release that water down into turbines. And these are things that can come on pretty much instantaneously to avoid brownouts and blackouts. So just kind of a few takeaways, things I found interesting. Hopefully some of that was of some interest. So Mary Grace had mentioned this already, but back in 2020, the Environmental Advisory Committee came to City Council and everybody, and they came up with these, what I think is just a really good baseline for what we need to follow to achieve our goals here in Laramie. And, you know, the city, myself, we've been following these recommendations. ARE and the task force, now the coalition, has been doing the same. So I just did want to give another a shout out to Environmental Advisory Committee, and they really got us on this path. And, you know, these bullet points have shown to have a lot of merit, and we're further along with some than others. But, you know, Environmental Advisory Committee is a great resource for the city and the county for our efforts. So the next one, of course, these are resolutions that you're all familiar with. Mary Grace had mentioned those too, but these are also the resolutions that are guiding our policy, and we are working hard on the staff level to try to meet these goals that have been set for us by council. And the next one. So things that have been accomplished at the city. There's been quite a bit. Some of these have been accomplished. Some of these are still in progress, but really, if you look at it, the various different departments have really come online and bought into this and have really got the ball rolling in many different ways to start to improve our emissions and our energy consumption. And I think the next step is to really kind of put numbers to some of this so we can see percentages and dollar amounts.
It looks like Councilor Doherty needs to ask a question.
I just wanted to say, can we linger on this slide for a bit, Darren, because
Yes.
This makes me very happy, and I just think there's so many things that I want people to be able to digest it. Thank you.
I think that's an appropriate request. It's sorry to interrupt, Darren. The presentation was flowing along well, but I do think there's a lot of information there. Of course, you can go back and look at this later. This is in our agenda materials as well, if you want to look at this again. But there is quite a bit there, and maybe somebody has something else. But yeah, it's a lot of items. But I think what that highlights, Councilor O'Doherty, is that there are a lot of different ways to approach this issue. You know, it doesn't have to be, boy, if we're not focused 100% on this particular avenue to achieving these goals, we're not going to get there, because there are a lot of ways to go around this. And I think that's something that we really want to, once again, just thank the staff for, which is being creative and innovative enough to say, well, there's a lot of different ways to, I keep wanting to use the expression skin the cat, which I hate. I don't know what else to say. And this is a good reflection of that. So we've lingered, I've blathered. I'm going to go back to Darren now. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, Councilor Doherty, it is. I mean, I like this slide too. It's pretty cool when you put all this information together and really see all the efforts that have been done. It's encouraging, and I think this will only improve, you know, as we get a formal plan adopted and as we move forward. So the next slide is kind of focuses right in on public works. Many of you are already familiar with a lot of this stuff, but this is what they provided for this presentation. You know, UV treatment at the wastewater plant will reduce 10% of the power on that system. Replacement boiler project, which is happening right now. It's going to produce a 25% energy savings. You know, solar street lights, LED light conversions on, you know, out the streets department. A partnership with Rocky Mountain Power, that's great. Up at our new North Campus Municipal Operations Center, we have a solar array up there, LED lights. That's a new building, so that was built with these kind of improvements in mind. The $35,000 or $38,000 incentive rebate from Rocky Mountain Power. So a lot of cooperation there. And then, of course, fleet, which is kind of cool. We've had 8 hybrids. Most of those are police interceptors, but not all. Some are F-150 pickups. 8 that are actively in the fleet now, 8 on order, 4 planned to come in. There's idle reduction technology, diesel over electric for heavy equipment. So, you know, we're not necessarily just going out and buying whatever. You know, there's a conscious effort being made on the side of the city. You know, emissions and emissions reduction is going into the kind of the planning of everything we do now at the departmental level, and it's being looked at and trying to be incorporated into our budget. So it's been bought in pretty widespread throughout the city. So it's pretty neat to see. This one here is kind of a oldie, not so goodie, I guess, because it hasn't happened yet, and most of you are familiar with this, but it's good to keep it fresh in everybody's mind. There's still the lease option by NextEra Energy on the Sailor Solar project out on the Monolith Ranch. You've heard this before. We were hoping this was going to get built a few years ago. We're still hopeful that it will get built. We're hearing that a large-scale facility similar to this is potentially going to get built south of Cheyenne. So surely we can get ours built too, is the hope. And so not only will this bring in a tremendous amount of renewable energy into the city of Laramie, As most of you know, all the electrical energy consumed in Laramie is imported on WAPA lines. A lot of that, some of that's hydro, but most of that's coming in from the coal plants. This would allow us to basically almost go entirely renewable. 160 megawatts is the planned output of this facility, and that is basically greater than the entire maximum load currently of the city of Laramie, including the University of Wyoming campus. So if we could get locally generated renewable energy, that would be great. Of course, there's the economic benefit there. This one would have a battery backup component to it, so it could also help feed the system in the evening.
Looks like we've got a question from Councilmember Schuster.
No, a comment. We teach some of this technology, and the battery backup, if this company comes through, is very, very in the future. It is the first 100% rebuildable, recyclable battery. No other company is doing this yet. Not in cars, not in everything else, but this is a rebuildable, renewable, recyclable battery package that's coming out. And it is something just absolutely fantastic to study. So I hope to see this one come to fruition because, again, it will produce energy and also take a percentage of it, put it in the battery backup. So this unit will be able to put out as much energy at night as it is during the day, this solar array. So it just, studying it is just fantastic. I'm very impressed with it. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Yeah, Councilor Schuster, I 100% agree. This is a great one, and I can assure you that the assistant city manager has been working really hard behind the scenes to try to get this one to come through, and I'm doing a little bit when I can, and this is at the top of the list. I think a really great, cool project that that Laramie wants and needs. You know, so we're still working on it. And I guess my last slide before I turn it over to Corinne, this was just kind of a gee whiz thing I thought might be of some interest to some folks. I took a tour of Jack's Solar Garden down in Longmont, Colorado this summer. And, you know, I think that solar, of course, we realize that we're limited, you know, with the Wyoming statute and the size of the solar installations we can do. But one of the things that we get kind of building off of this Sailor Solar proposal is, well, what do you do with the land underneath it? You know, can you do anything with it? You know, solar farms aren't necessarily the most visually appealing thing, and we don't want to have a bunch of weeds under there, and we're taking, you know, land out of production. So really, Jack's Solar Garden down in Longmont, Boulder County, has taken that and is really trying hard to figure out ways to make agriculture viable underneath these solar panels. And so it was just kind of a really cool thing. This one, it's a 7-acre solar farm, makes 1.2 megawatts, privately funded, although Boulder County and Xcel Energy were partners on it. Boulder County has a carbon net neutrality goal by 2040. And, you know, so they are benefiting from this basically by they're counting the renewable energy coming in off of this solar farm as part to meet their renewable energy goals. And they get the irrigation water for this from a municipal hydrant. It's actually a water district hydrant, but it's basically the same thing, treated municipal water at a greatly reduced rate. Xcel Energy subsidized a $35,000 three-phase electrical connection to get this hooked up, and then they are holding the renewable energy credits on it in exchange for that. And so the farm itself, they've got solar panels at various different heights. A normal farm is about 4 feet in the air or less, but they're 6 to 8 feet tall on 17-foot centers, so they can get sheep underneath them and cattle underneath some of them. They're trying to figure out different ways what crops will grow at what heights, so you can get a small tractor and implements in between them. Although a lot of this is really by hand stuff. They're growing, there's different plots. Some of it is food plots, vegetables. Some of it is a lot of herbs and stuff, herbs that they are providing. Local restaurants and things will actually come in and ask for requests for that they can grow this or grow that, and they're meeting those orders. They partner with the local food bank, and when I was there, they were about halfway through the growing season, and they put 8,200 pounds of vegetables to the local food bank, so much that they were almost ready to turn them away. We can't take any more carrots. You know, they're just growing so much. The one thing, these solar panels are the single axis panels, so they basically track in one axis. They follow the sun around the sky. you need that, or else the plants are too shaded for too long. But the plants growing underneath make the panels about 8% more efficient than they would be, produce more energy than they would otherwise, they found. So there just seems to be a lot of kind of the symbiotic benefit here. It's impressive to see. They give tours a lot. Anybody has an interest, go and check it out. University of Arizona is really in charge of doing the food plot research. They're also doing some similar work in Arizona. And then Colorado State is really looking at the grass, hay, grazing. When I was there, they weren't there at the time, but they were getting ready to bring some cattle in under a portion of this, simulating grazing and various things to try to find a way to get some production agriculture underneath solar farms, because solar farms are going to become much more prolific, and it's a way to make dual use of these lands. So
Darren?
they also, yes, Mayor.
I was just going to say, given what you've learned about this and your familiarity with our own City of Laramie resources, this is really interesting, exciting to see about if some of these things do end up being able to move forward in the future. It just strikes me, as you put that last piece there, that would probably be, at least the way we're situated now, a good fit for our operations today. If we were to continue to do with grass, hay, and grazing type activities in conjunction with solar installation. Am I correct in feeling that way? Thinking that would be the immediate fit for what we have going on here?
Yes, Mayor. You know, if we have panels out at the ranch, maybe that industrial scale facility, you know, yeah, certainly being able to do some grazing or grass hay under that.
We just don't have much of a growing season for vegetables, is why I'm kind of pursuing this line of questioning.
Yes, the thing about these panels, and part of the research is they have a lot of instrumentation, right? They have temperature probes and soil moisture, and it's all under drip irrigation. But there's microclimates that form underneath these panels. And so, yes, we don't have a very great growing season in Laramie. But, you know, in the pioneer days, they grew a lot here. And so basically what the panels are going to do is essentially warm up the ground underneath, and the plants are going to help to cool the panels, and the panels are going to help to warm up the plants. And so basically you get, you know, microclimates that will help. And maybe we have to do raised beds or certain things. I was thinking more, you know, if we have parks and open space, you know, I know we have some community gardens and things like this. Maybe we start doing dual use. We can get some solar installations in with community gardens underneath them with, you know, a lot of augmented food production, and really start to just check a lot of boxes. Certainly the hay and the grazing, when we get into larger scale stuff or places where we don't have good viable irrigation water, like if we were to put the center pivot at the Monolith Ranch on a solar array, certainly, you know, finding a way to graze underneath that would be good. The grazing, it depends on the irrigation. It tends to need to be limited. They've found so far early season type grazing, you know, you can't graze for an extended period of time, but you certainly can. And they certainly are seeing weight gains, and then they're learning more all the time. So I think this could go a lot of different ways. And I think it could help a lot with public perception. And I think it could just, you know, help out in a lot of different ways. So that's kind of why I threw this one in. It's kind of a gee whiz, as we all have these questions about solar panels and farms.
I really appreciate that answer, and yeah, I'm trying to be learning more all the time about this too. There's a lot of things I wouldn't have even thought of. So thank you for taking a minute for that.
Sure. Well, my talk is done, but you're going to get why I'm really here tonight is to introduce you to Corinne, who is just amazing so far and is doing a good job for us. She is doing a research graduate assistantship with the City of Laramie and the Hobbs School. We are working together to fund this. And the main goal that I have for this project is, and Corinne will go into this in a little bit greater detail, some of these other communities like Jackson and maybe some of these other more gung-ho and well-funded communities aren't necessarily wanting to take the steps to plan. But I think here in Laramie, a plan has a lot of merit, as we're budget maybe restricted, and we all kind of got to build our coalitions and work towards these end goals. So we have basically draft plans in place. We have a matrix that was developed by Rachel's students in campus sustainability at the Hobbs School. They've been a tremendous asset, and they've really got us to where we're at now. But what we need is a formal plan that everybody can work off of that is formally adopted by City Council is the hope. And then it can also provide the base for potentially bringing the county in, bringing the university in maybe someday, maybe bringing the community in as a whole. And so Corinne's project is really that, to take the work that's already been done and advance that a little bit further down the field and get us a formal plan to all work on, so that we can meet that 2050 carbon net neutrality goal, or the 2030 goal if Mountain Towns 2030 talks us into taking that leap. So Rachel, do you have anything you'd like to add? I'd like you to give your thoughts on this project too.
Well, thank you, Darren. And this connects well to the other presentation we just heard about. I am so grateful that Corinne has joined the health school as one of our master's students, and also that she can sort of be the first person to pursue this opportunity. This is probably, I would say, the culmination of our joint efforts between campus sustainability, the health school, and the city of Laramie, that we were able to pursue joint funding for this position. I think that just speaks a lot to the value of this partnership. So I'm grateful that Corinne will be able to engage in this meaningful work for our community, but also earn a master's degree and learn in the process. So just really excited that she's here, and I'm very grateful to continue my work in collaboration with Darren and others.
Thank you both for that, and appreciate noting that successful collaboration piece too. I think that's always important for us to highlight how there's a lot we can do in partnership on some of these things. This is a lot. This is a big project that spans several decades. And although the city of Laramie is used to planning things on the long term like that, not all of them are that long term. So I appreciate your highlighting some of that for us. Corinne Green, sorry about your name, and also could you please pronounce your last name for us?
Sure, no problem. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you to Darren and Rachel for the introduction. I really appreciated the opportunity to get to work on this project. My name is Corinne Sheska, but if anyone mispronounces it, I take no offense to that. It is kind of a crazy last name. But I am here today to talk to you guys about the work that I'm going to be doing, both with the university, but also the city over the next year or so. Next slide, please. So just to introduce myself to you all, and I do apologize for anyone that was at the EAC meeting a few weeks ago. There might be some repetition here, but I do have some new information for you, so it won't all be old. But for those who don't know me, who haven't heard from me yet, I'm coming from the University of Michigan, where I got my undergraduate degree in a dual degree, both environmental studies, which was more interdisciplinary, and also ecology, evolution, and biodiversity. But I did my undergraduate thesis work in local level climate planning, and I worked as a project specialist for 2 years out in Northern California in rural community development and natural resource management. So this position has been a really great extension of my background and my interests, both in climate planning and also working with more rural areas. Next slide, please. And so just to give you a bit of an overview of the position, and you've heard some of this already, but it is sort of an inaugural position in sustainability and climate action planning with the city, which is really exciting. And also the joint nature of it with the city and the university and that partnership. It's all very novel and very exciting, and I'm very grateful to be here in the position. And so the main goal of what I'm going to be working on is developing and presenting a municipal emissions reduction plan to City Council this summer. But I'm also going to be doing other things involved in my position. The city is committed to doing annual emissions inventories of their greenhouse gases. So one of my tasks was to complete the emissions inventory for fiscal year 2022. And I'm going to actually be presenting some of those results to you in a second here. And also interfacing with ICLEI, which is the organization that supports local governments working on this stuff, and they developed the calculator that we use. Interfacing with other communities, like Darren was talking about earlier, there is a wealth of information in other communities that are also working on this stuff. So working with them, communicating with them, figuring out what's worked for them, what hasn't worked, what might work for us. I'm also going to be serving as a city representative on the Climate Action Task Force, which you all heard from in their wonderful presentation before this one. And finally, any other engagement or outreach relevant to emission reduction planning and sustainability at the city. Thank you. Yep. And so the next thing I wanted to get into is the emissions calculator 2022 update. Some of you may have seen presentations similar to this before because we have been doing these inventories since 2018. But for those of you who are maybe less familiar, ICLEI has a number of categories related to emissions reductions or emissions inventories. But these are the 5 that we look at for Laramie, which are buildings and facilities, vehicle fleet, employee commute, solid waste facilities, and waste and wastewater treatment facilities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for buildings and facilities, this is the latest data for 2022. To do this, we collect data from all utility bills for the different energy companies for each month over the course of a fiscal year for each department. And this is still a bit of a work in progress. We're working to include data from all of those exciting solar projects that you heard about earlier, working to include energy efficiency improvement and solar energy production there. But these are the latest numbers that we have here in the chart on the right. Next slide, please. The next category is vehicle fleet. So these are the emissions that you're going to see from all of the city vehicles. So we look at fuel type, gasoline and diesel. You can see that breakdown on the right. And we're essentially looking at gallons consumed and total vehicle miles traveled for different vehicle types. And this is not broken down by department, but yeah. And so employee commute, these are personal vehicles used by employees. So we sent out a survey. Some of you may have seen that, in which people filled out different types of questions related to their commute. And so we're looking at very similar numbers as the vehicle fleet, but this is for employees' personal vehicles that they use to commute to work. Next slide, please. And then solid waste facilities. So this is by and far the biggest emitter that we have in the city. It's just the nature of having a landfill here. So we look at the tons of waste landfilled, but we also get some offsets from, we have a green waste program and bio waste composting program. So we're looking at about, for this year, 71,000 metric tons of carbon emissions coming off the landfill. But like I said, we do get some offsets from the green waste composting and the bio waste composting. Next slide, please. Lastly, we have waste and wastewater treatment facilities. And so here we're looking at nitrous oxide emissions from the wastewater treatment process and then any discharge that comes from that. So you can see those numbers there on the right. And then looking at it all together here, you can see that we've been doing this for the past 5 years. And so the landfill and the solid waste facilities is a pretty big portion of it. And so you can see that we have 2019 we use as our baseline. 2018 was the first year that we did it, but we really finalized the process and inventory data collection in 2019. So that's our baseline. And then in 2020, you can see that we increased and we've been declining a bit ever since. So we're going to be using these numbers and this data as a way to forecast different scenarios. And if we incorporated this emission reduction strategy, how would it reduce our emissions and different ways that we might reach our carbon neutrality goal. And so the ICLEI tool is actually really cool in that it allows us to forecast different scenarios and incorporate different things using this data. So I just wanted to present that to all of you to give you a sense of where we're starting and the data that we're working with to hopefully work with that to get us to our plan for carbon neutrality by 2050. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that we are not starting from scratch here. I listed a couple plans that have been done by students at the Hobbs School before this. I also want to acknowledge the EAC recommendations that have been done, which Darren presented on earlier, work of the task force and many, many others in getting us here. And so I've been looking at all of that. And so just to give you a sense of the kind of things we're going to be looking into, in addition to all of the work that has already been done by the city, we want to look at assessing fleet efficiencies, upgrading fleet vehicles, optimizing transit routes, upgrading maintenance equipment, and then in the facilities and efficiency sector, there's already been a lot of work done in this area, as Darren presented, but increasingly looking at building efficiency, energy monitoring, opportunities for rooftop solar, potentially photovoltaic facility, maybe even geothermal, reducing water use. And the other part of this is carbon offsets, so looking at green space and other things related to that. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's essentially going to be my goal to take those existing recommendations of things that could be done and figure out how it's going to fit into Laramie and what's going to work for us. So I essentially see this as happening in 3 phases, the first of which we're in now, which is the information gathering and plan development phase. The first part of that was going to be collection for the annual emissions calculator, which I just talked about, but then also a literature review of case studies of different areas working on emissions reduction in their localities. And then also interviews with stakeholders within the city. I've already done a few informal tours of different departments to get a sense of what's being done. And I want to talk to people about obviously what we've done so far, what people want to see happen, and also what they don't want to see. You know, that's important too. And so from that feedback and that research, we want to put together an initial draft of the plan by spring of this year. And then we're going to circulate that for feedback to city representatives, but also county and community as well, because this is a city-specific plan. But as Darren said, we want this to be a jumping off point potentially for a bigger community-wide effort. So we want to involve as many people as we can. And then the final stage is going to be finalizing the plan, getting a final draft together, and we hope to present that by this summer. And next slide, please. And so this is just a timeline of everything that I just talked about. So this fall and winter, we're going to be doing the interviews, research, plan development. Spring 2023, we're going to be drafting the first, we're going to have the first draft. May or June, we're going to be circulating that draft for feedback. And then August or July of 2023 is when we're going to be presenting to you all for adoption of the plan. And then beyond this, in the 2023 to 2024 academic year, I do hope to continue in this GA position, to continue this work and all of the natural extensions that it has, to hopefully develop a thesis resulting from this work for my master's and continue to work with you all. And so next slide, please. And that is it. I put my email up there if any of you want to reach out or have any questions. I'd love to hear from you. And that's it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. A lot of really good information. It's nice to meet you and to hear about this plan. Really interesting. And, prior to your portion of the presentation, we were just talking about how this is such a sort of long-term effort, and it's really going to require this kind of a plan to have any chance of achieving what it wants to achieve. So it's really fortunate that the city of Laramie is in a position to work with you on this moving forward. And I also appreciate the emphasis on it being sort of a building block for bringing in other critical partners and integrating this kind of across the community. And I know that's something that a lot of our residents here in the city of Laramie and Albany County are going to be excited and supportive of, and folks at the University of Wyoming as well. Other comments or questions from the council? City Manager Jordan.
Mayor, when you're ready for me, I just wanted to add a couple things. One, I want to, again, reiterate the appreciation that we have here in my office and on behalf of the city for the partnership with the Hobbs School and for this new graduate assistantship position, and how fortunate we feel to have Corrine on our side, so to speak. So thank you so much, Rachel and Corrine. I also wanted to share with you, Todd had emailed me while the presentation was going on, and we neglected to add one really new initiative to the list of things that we're working on for you tonight. So quickly, I'll just let you know we started a conversation probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago here with respect to our downtown light fixtures. And it is maybe not known to everybody, but the city, as a municipal government, we actually pay the cost of electrifying those light poles on that, what we call the downtown grid. We certainly don't pay for all of the streetlights in town, but we do pay for those. And so we're looking right now at some changes to those that would take the energy consumption from 380 watts per pole down to 139 watts per pole. It's like a 63% decrease in energy consumption. And for the city manager, I love the energy consumption going down, but I like the budget going down as well. And so Todd's estimating if we can pull this off, we'd be looking at probably $16,000 a year savings in the cost the city pays to illuminate the downtown. So we thought we'd throw that in as something that we're working on right now and was not in your presentation. Thank you.
City Manager, that's really interesting. Are we talking about kind of a retrofit type situation? Because we have those sort of specialized antique lights, antique-looking lights to fit in with our, our downtown aesthetic. We're talking about a retrofit situation, I assume.
That is the case. There's a lot of reasons that staff have concern about the existing downtown light poles. Some of them having to do with maintenance, some of them having to do with just the design is unable to have, say, signs added easily to it, Christmas lights, things like that. And then also we thought, well, let's look at the bulbs themselves and figure out if we can increase the efficiency of the poles as well. So there's a lot of reasons that many of your staff don't think that we have the best quality product downtown, and starting that conversation is what led us to look at the efficiencies as well.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Vice Mayor, thanks for waiting. I see you've got your hand there.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I am almost speechless. This was an amazing work session, and thank you so much. This is pretty interesting, and I am just thrilled that we are moving in this direction, and appreciate the interaction, and it's just been great. So thank you.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that I think this council, all 9 members of this council, really appreciate about this endeavor and this project is it's a great example of when we can holistically respond to something the community has supported and asked us to put into place, and then we've utilized our citizen advisory boards, in this case environmental advisory group, to sort of digest this down into next steps, and then we've been able to carry through on those steps, and then have a check-in like this to see where we're at in that process and where we're going to go, and know that it's just something that the community really prioritizes, and that we're actually able to make these concrete and demonstrable steps towards. And that's nice for us. It's nice for this community. We really appreciate this. Dr. Budelli, go ahead.
Thank you again. I just wanted to echo the gratitude to Janine and Darren for the collaboration. We feel just as lucky in the Helm School to have this position in place and support one of our students. And I just wanted to note how Corinne alluded to hoping to continue this work in the 2023-2024 academic year. And I wanted to let you all know that I'm committed to finding an equivalent amount of support on our side of things, and just would encourage us to continue to explore that together as we all move into budgeting season for the upcoming year. I think the timeline that Corinne offered, I'll just highlight, is so ambitious. She's diving in head first. She's only been here for a couple of months, and I am really grateful for her enthusiasm and commitment. But to have a full 2 years of support for her work will be advantageous, we think, to the city, but also to her learning experience in the Help School. So I am actively identifying that funding for our portion now. And I'll finally just close by sharing that I learn something new every time I listen to Darren and others in this space. And I really appreciated the growing under the solar panels, and just wanted to share that some research that has been done in Laramie suggests that a 253 square foot plot can yield an average of 128 pounds of vegetables in Laramie. So some of my colleagues have done this research, and that's a meaningful amount of food to supply 2 adults 4.5 months of their daily intake of vegetables. So given that we have the highest rates of food insecurity in the state in Albany County, I just thank you, Darren, for sharing that really helpful information. And thank you, Corinne, for your wonderful presentation.
Rays of hope in a sometimes overwhelming world. Councilmember Cumby, you had a hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to thank the presenters and the city planners and everyone who's put this presentation together. It's interesting, throughout the past 2 years of my being on council, I've worked on pieces, and tonight's holistic presentation of things has really brought together so many parts and has helped me to see it more as a whole. And I really appreciate that. And I find it really raises my enthusiasm. So thank you so much. And Corinne, beautiful presentation. I love your work and I look forward to seeing your outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. Council members, are there any other comments or questions now? Well, I think we can safely say that we look forward to future updates and information about this. We really appreciate the time and effort. It's been very interesting. I think we've all learned a couple of things here. And that's what's good about these kinds of work sessions. We look forward to learning more as we go forward, because it seems like new leaves will be turned up as we dig deeper into this. And we wish you the best of luck, Corinne, and we're so glad that you're here. And of course, we would also commit to doing whatever it is that we could for securing a future funding for the project as well on our end, to the extent that we can. So thank you so much. All right. Well, that is going to conclude that portion of the work session, and it was very, very interesting. We have another item to discuss on work session tonight, and that is the presentation and discussion around the Solar App Plus, which was requested by City Council. And we have staff for a report on that, but I'll turn it over to the city manager first, and then we'll move forward.
Thank you, Council. Todd Fieser, our Assistant City Manager, and Clarice Hoff, our Building Supervisor, is going to make the presentation tonight. But I just want to let you know, they're going to talk to you about an opportunity that the city has, and that was raised in discussion amongst all of you, I don't know, some number of weeks ago. We thought that we should come and make a brief presentation to you about this product so that you could understand the pros and the cons if the city were to go down this path. So with that, I'll turn it over to Todd and Clarice, and I see they're both joining us from Todd's office next door.
Absolutely. Thanks, Janine. Of course, with me tonight, I've got Clarice Hoff, who's our Code Administration Supervisor. Her and I jointly had a meeting with the representative from Solar App Plus, and then developed some information and developed some points of information for council to think about, plus to look at our current permitting process. But with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Clarice and let her move with it, and then we'll answer some questions at the end.
Well, good evening. We have a brief presentation for Solar App Plus. It is an automated solar permitting tool that is for residential solar installs. It is instantly a permitting software. And the way that this works is that licensed contractors that are licensed with the city of Laramie would need to register through the solar application, download their licenses, any pertinent certifications and other requirements that the Solar App Plus would require. And after doing so and after being accepted, then they would have to also take an hour training through the Solar App process. If they are approved, then they are able to submit their solar applications through the Solar App Plus by inputting the design's specifications. With the Solar App Plus, they do not take line diagrams of the solar arrays, so that would not be part of this. When they go through the process, and if they are approved and they submit their information and the permit is code compliant, or the permit application is code compliant, then the permit is instantly issued. The contractor would also be paying $25 per permit application that they submit on this program. In doing this, this does take the city out of the permitting process and of any plan review. Once the permit has been issued as code compliance, the jurisdiction does get an email that with the permit and a checklist for a final inspection when the job has been completed. If it's not compliant, then it is rejected with feedback for the contractor to move forward. It does allow the city to collect the same permitting fees that we do now for the solar app. So when we do now as we take in the permit, we receive our fees and plan review fees. And then the checklist that is given to the inspectors to do the final inspection, the inspectors would have to go through an hour training as well through the solar app program. And next slide. So we have some points of interest that we found interesting and thought we should bring to your attention. And this came about in visiting with actual installers of the solar arrays. No two solar projects are the same. There are 10 different panel providers in the state of Wyoming. One installer explained to me the installation method can be different. The solar array layouts, panel differences, roof structure variances, and design engineering variances. I do have a concern in those items due to the fact there is no line diagram that we are given as far as the placement of this. And in our inspections now, we do a pre-inspection at the time so that we can assure that the materials, the components that are being used are the same components that they have submitted with their permit application and plans. So the inspector goes out and he makes sure at that time everything is matching up before the install to ward off any problems at the end. There are times that when the solar installer gets to the site, there has to be adjustments made from the plans due to the fact the engineers are not on site and not seeing the actual functionality of it. And so adjustments are made at that time by redlining to have the project go to move on. This product is for contractors only. It is not a program that homeowners would be utilizing. It is for residential only and is not used for commercial projects. And of course, state buildings leased or owned are done through the state of Wyoming. And next point of, there could be some confusion as to who and where people are where and what and when contractors are to be applying to the city and when they would be utilizing the solar app. The plan review fees would be waived by the contractors using the solar app from 2019 to September 30th is where I pulled the data. We would have lost $8,841.39 in revenue in plan review fees. This benefits the contractors in the residential solar industry, and for the contractors that are submitting for commercial projects would still be paying plan review fees. Our solar application through 2019 to September 30th was 38 solar application, 5 commercial, 33 residential. And the line, like I said, the solar app plus does take the jurisdiction out of any plan review process. It takes us, we're not going to be notified until the permit is issued. And at that time, we will actually be able, at that point, to verify if the contractor is actually licensed with the city. And then at that time, we're also given a checklist. In visiting with a couple of the contractors in regards to our plan review structure, is we have an estimated plan review time of 3 weeks, 15 business days. On the solar apps, we're closer to turning those around in 10, and depending on our workload, we've actually been able to do it within 24 hours, depending on the workload, inspections that we also perform. In visiting with a couple of local contractors, compared to what they go through, the state is averaging about 30 to 45 days on their turnaround. They have a 15, 20-day plan review, and then after the plan review has passed, then there's a 10-day permitting period that they go through. If there's any corrections or anything that needs to be done, that those 10, 15 days start over again, so you can see how the time builds up. And then the other difficult thing would be is the integration into our current system, because this is a permit that is submitted by a secondary permitting process. It would have to be, then we would have to figure out a way for that to integrate into our current system of Naviline, and also figure out how the online payment would be able to come over into the system as well, so that we can maintain accurate records for the individual addresses that are doing the solar applications for their homes. At this point, that system of solar app does not integrate over into Naviline, and it would have to be worked out. And next, in a visit with the representative for solar app, he was talking about the soft costs, that the average soft costs for the jurisdictions have an authority was ranging about $1,260, and that was in permitting and inspections. So they were charging for their inspections. The city of Laramie, our average cost is $598.83. That includes the plan review fee, the permitting fee, and the inspections are part of the permitting fee. And solar app takes the authority having jurisdiction interaction completely out, except at the final inspection, without having the line drawing and just having no eyes on the project. That can bring in some issues at the end. The solar app pass rate is 19% inspection failure rate. The city of Laramie's process works toward 100% pass rate, and that failure rate through solar app would increase during inspections being done at the time of final, because that's when we're going to have our eyes on it. And if at that point, when it's at the final, it can be more costly to the customer, to the contractor, especially if the railings and racks are having to be moved. And that would be due to the fact that we're not getting any line drawings. In other research that I have come out, that information has come out that line diagrams are really important, that they show a lot of information that indicates the components of the solar. And I just want to get it right here. The solar one less diagrams are essential part of every solar contractor's process. It ensures everything is documented in writing, helps identify compatibility issues, and helps a more professional install. and an electrical single line diagram showing the interconnection in between the different solar components, including all the wiring, conduit, voltage, amperage, and voltage drop calculator. It's the layout. And it also, when we get the line drawings, it also shows the different types of solar applications that can be installed. And on the next slide. Oh, did I skip one? I mentioned our estimated plan review time is 3 weeks. Recently, it's been as short as 24 hours, and it's based on our workload. It also enables us to communicate with the contractors and at times the consumer. And we have an average return 10 days or less on our solar plan reviews. The inspector is trained in solar review. He's went to several solar classes and trainings through the International Code Council. And we also do pre-inspections, inspections in between. We have one contractor that does like to call for a rough prior to a final, and we accommodate that, and all our inspections are included in the permit fee and is not part, we don't charge traditional for inspection fees. And as one of the things that has been a concern and was brought up by the solar app is that the installers know right away when they can schedule their projects. Well, in visiting with the contractors that do solar installs, they know what their schedule is. They are installing and they're having to schedule out. So they're already taking into consideration the 3 weeks. And even if we do a quicker turnaround, there are times the permits then will sit for a while before they'll even pay for them because they've scheduled it out to meet their scheduling in installing solar installs as they go. So next, that's, oh, that's, okay.
We did reach out to numerous contractors that we use, and one of these comments that I appreciate from Danny Kluberton with Creative Energies, and they pulled 20 of our 38 permits, you know, that they currently don't have any issues with our permitting process, and actually say that we're one of the faster ones in the state, and they appreciate that, which I think is just important for council to hear. You know, right now, basically for me, as I have reviewed and looked through this, my biggest concerns are the fact that it creates confusion on where people apply for the permits and where they go and how it works. It also divides up between who can actually go to them, because we have homeowners that do their own work. They can't actually go through that process, so we can't feasibly waive the plan review fee for the homeowners if a contractor's not doing it and it's not certified through Solar App Plus. So there's just, right now for me, there's too many concerns. I also believe that in their own website, they say that there's no cost to the jurisdiction having authority to implement Solar App, but for some reason they're offering a $15,000 fee or award if you pilot the program. It doesn't make sense to me why that's happening. So we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
And the other thing that I did clarify with the representative is this is not a mandatory program. So we would more than likely have contractors choosing both ways. And then the question is going to be the ones that are coming through over the counter. We're going to have to charge a plan review fee. And so, I mean, it isn't a mandatory one-fit-all solar app product.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation and information on that. We're going to go to questions now. I have some weighed in with Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I think the ones, maybe I have a different read on this. I will start with that hedge, but this being a not one size fits all, I guess, permitting process, to me is one of the advantages. I mean, I think, my take on it would be the most significant hurdle we have to wide deployment of solar panels in the city of Laramie is going to be sort of workload. One of the many bottlenecks will almost certainly, because we all know the realities of the budget of the city of Laramie, one of those bottlenecks will inevitably be, if we see an increase in applications, will be permitting. So if we can find a way to use technology to take care of some of those, if we take care of 10% of them through this process, that's 10% less work that has to go through, the more involved process. And, I understand that there is some risk to a contractor if they use this process and they don't do the work correctly. But that's the whole point of the licensing, right? Like that's the work should be done properly because that's what our whole process is set up to ensure. And so, I think in my mind, this takes some of those really easy permitting or permits, takes those off of the top. And then Clarice, your staff is more staff. I know you do the lion's share of it, but that's, you then can focus on the more complicated ones, the ones that are going to have some requirement. And so, I do think that would be some benefit. And I think the ability for someone to file permits, to do this sort of work, to complete those permits 24/7 is a value that we shouldn't miss out on. And then I think finally, in looking at the Solar App website, Todd, I think that $15,000 is simply a prize for piloting the software, because there is going to be all of these things we're talking about as hurdles, as obstacles. That's what the $15,000 is for. In my mind, you have a chance at a prize because you're going to have to fumble through some of this stuff because it's not widely distributed yet. So, Mr. Mayor, that's, I guess, maybe not a question, and I apologize it didn't end with a "don't you agree" or something, but it ended up being just a comment.
Councilmember Harrington, it certainly raises questions, so we'll count it. I think we had some response, desire for some response from recent Assistant City Manager. So go ahead, if you folks want to address that, or if you'd like to just hear more questions first, that's fine.
Honorable Mayor, we couldn't hardly hear you there.
I said if you'd like to touch on anything that Councilmember Harrington brought up, go ahead, or we can go to the next question.
Well, I guess the only thing I would like to point out is I don't see solar applications as simple, easy. They are relatively complex. There's quite a few components in regards to it and the wiring, and especially where they are not requiring any line diagrams to be submitted for any kind of approval. We're not going to have that. Where the jurisdiction is out of the process until the permit is issued, you have no say. So you're out of the process, and then we'll be dealing with the back end of that, how that will be, as well as the back end of figuring out how to get this into our current system so we maintain accurate records, how we are going to get this in the back end into our, the money side of it into the proper categories as well.
Councilmember O'Doherty.
I hope that worked to unmute because I have a really slow computer. Okay, first I want to thank Clarice and Todd for really researching this, because I was one of the people that pushed, please look into this because there's a prize, and the prize, it's because it's the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So it's a way to try to increase solar applications. And so they were offering money to help us pay for the time it would take to integrate. But I thought that your presentation really made it clear to me that I don't think we need this yet. And also, I am also uncomfortable with not having the line drawings. And so I hope it's something that we would consider in the future. But I understand your misgivings about it. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, through the research, we've actually found that there's 6 or 8 different solar apps out there. And potentially in the future, one of them may be more fitting for the city of Laramie. But at this time, oh, there's 20. Clarice just told me there's 20 similar type applications. And in the future, we could absolutely see that. If I could respond a little bit to Councilor Harrington from before, we may have an hour to an hour and a half in review time on the applications now. And so even if it saved us 10% across 40 applications, we're talking about saving 4 to 6 hours a year out of the applications, or a year and a half as it goes. We currently do have a pretty good system, and we have a good set of contractors that are installing solar applications. They turn things in pretty well, and it goes pretty smoothly at this point. But we are willing to look at technology advancements as long as they really do solve some of the situations that we're looking to solve.
Other questions about this? So what I want to just touch on is that my takeaway is this from what I've heard tonight, is that it's not so much that we wouldn't want to pursue something like this, it's that the timing may not be right, and there may be a better fit when we do reach that point where we may want to partner up. And it seems like that's where we find ourselves. And with, I think you said 20 potential organizations, if we find ourselves hitting up against this as something we need to do, then we can trust the staff to go back and take a look at that. We can revisit this in a future work session meeting and review some options, or review whatever options you folks have narrowed it down to. So this really isn't a conclusive, we're not interested. It's that at this time with this particular offer, we may not be ready to move forward. Is that more or less, Council, your understanding? I see heads kind of nodding along, which to me isn't overly grim. It's just we've learned a little bit more now. Maybe we'll be a little more prepared in the future when we reach this point again. Yeah, go ahead, Assistant City Manager.
Honorable Mayor, if I could add, our enterprise resource planning software that we're planning on implementing in January of 2023, if you want to see most of my staff stop in horror, is we're actually embarking down the development code process. And as part of that process, there's going to be included in that online submittals so that we can clean up a lot of the processes and workflows. And I'm super excited to see what that brings for us. It's something that we've been sorely needing for many years, and it's going to be another hard lift, another piece that's going to take staff time and be hard to pull, but it is going to lead to benefits and easier applications, online submittals to get this done. And we're excited to see how that goes. So keep that in mind.
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm not sure that the burden of the software updates across a lot of important departments in the city is always at the top of mind for council members. And it's good for us to be reminded that we're in the process of updating and transitioning to new systems for a whole bunch of that. And I'm glad you brought that up again as well, because it's going to streamline some things, and it may also, speaking of the future again, help us get a better grasp on where we might want to take a look at things like we're talking about tonight, and maybe a few other areas as well. So thank you, I do appreciate it. Council, has anybody else thought of any questions? Would you like to make any comments right now? Assistant City Manager Feeser, usually in the work session, and we come to this point, we say, well, we're kind of looking for your staff sort of looking for the input here, and I think what we're hearing from council, because I haven't seen anybody object to my summary here, is that I think we hear you loud and clear. So we're just looking forward to an update at this at a future point in time when we maybe get to that point of looking at a partnership like this. For the time being, we're okay with what we're doing, and we'll see where the building and the permitting department stands with some of these things after implementation of new software, and we have a little more time under our belt, so to speak, with some of this. So I think we're satisfied with that. We appreciate this presentation and update. Thank you. And City Manager, were you up next for anything here, or are we?
Not really. No, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Clarice and Todd for their research into this, and I think that's all we had for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of really good information for us tonight. Council, why don't we close that portion of the work session? We'll go to your updates and comments, and then to agenda review. Updates and comments up first. Who's raring to go? Might be that time where there aren't that many updates. Yes, City Clerk.
Mayor, I'm noticing that our public comment periods on each subject didn't get put on the agenda for tonight. I just wondered if you might want to seek any public comments on any of the agenda topics.
Let's go ahead and open public comments for any of the agenda topics, and then we'll go back for updates and comments if there are any. I see we've got some folks here, and if you'd like to provide some input, please feel free. The information that was provided in the presentations tonight is available on the city's website under the Agenda Center. If you'd like to dive in a little bit more on some of the presentations there, the information that was provided to the council, please feel free. Seeing no request for public comment, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period, take it back to council for comments and updates. I don't know this, there's always one of these work sessions where the timing isn't great for updates because you're all looking to upcoming meetings at the beginning of next month. But if you have any, go for it. Okay. Comments on anything? I think we made some comments about the substance of tonight's presentations, and I'm just really interested in a lot of this information I hear. A lot of these things I just really didn't know much about. City Manager, I see you put a hand up. Maybe.
Thank you, Mayor. In the realm of announcements, yes. I just wanted to bring your attention to some emails the city clerk has sent to you all, assessing your availability in coming weeks and, frankly, well, I guess months through the end of the year. We are working to plan the meet and greet with the legislative delegation from Albany County and an opportunity to visit with them about the upcoming legislative session for 2023. So if you could weigh in on your availability there. What we have discussed here is that schedules for the legislative committees are very full already in November. As you know, your schedule is very full as well. And so we have identified 3 early Friday evenings in November that we thought we could perhaps bring everybody together early on a Friday, 4:30 or some such, do an hour-and-a-half meeting with our legislators to kind of prep them on issues that are forthcoming and of concern to the city. So if you could let us know about that, that would be great. And then we'll also be talking to you at your next meeting about your work session calendar through the end of the year and staff schedules.
Thank you. So mindful of your availability for those things, and I think it's correct to think of it as pretty full. Appreciate that. Councilmember Schuster.
Yes, also there was a meeting possibility with our governor and the president of the university, and naturally it's scheduled on a Tuesday night. So I saw that myself and Councilor Pierce either asked for a late start on that evening or to move that meeting to Wednesday. So I saw she commented, I commented. I didn't know if anybody else did later on the day, and maybe I just missed it. So thank you on that.
Oh, that's good that you brought that up. Council, do you want to have a Wednesday meeting so that those of you that want to attend that can go, or go with the Vice Mayor's suggestion of maybe adjusting the schedule a little bit? Wednesday meeting's fine with me. I don't know about the rest of you.
I believe it's the 15th of next month.
So we could address, we could take care of this at a scheduling at the next city council meeting if you guys want to sort of let us know now or before the first meeting in November what you want to do. maybe you don't know right now, but let's take a look at that and we'll schedule it at the first meeting. Yes, Councilmember Cumby.
I would be available for a Wednesday meeting, and my one concern about a late meeting on Tuesday would be to look at the agenda and see how much we have. So
I think the 15th is a work session. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not 100% positive, but go ahead and take a look at your Wednesdays and your Tuesdays and see what you want to do, and let the city clerk know what your preference is as soon as you can, and then we'll set the meeting early at the first meeting in November.
I think the city clerk has something.
Oh yeah, I might be wrong about the work session.
Yes.
Yeah, city clerk.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that as the regular meeting that
Oh,
evening.
it's a regular. Yeah, it's a regular meeting. Okay.
Yes, the first
Anyway.
and the 15th would be regular meetings, and the 8th and the, what would it be, the 22nd would be our work sessions. Trying to figure the math out in my head.
Okay, and you know, I'll say this too. I think council, we typically do not have our regularly held meeting on election days. We usually bump that to the next Wednesday as well. So maybe just take a look at having 2 Wednesday meetings for the first half of November. Let the city clerk know as soon as you can, and then we'll set those at the meeting. Okay. All right, good. Good reminders. Thank you very much. How about other updates? Maybe we'll wait till next time. I didn't see a lot of people chomping at the bit there. Okay. City manager, please.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask council, we've determined in the last, say, 24 hours that we'll be able to have the work session on residential parking districts. Asked for last week. We'll be able to have that on November 9th. As we prepare for that work session, our anticipation is to kind of bring forward some of the ideas that we'd previously presented to you a few years ago about potential modification to residential parking districts. Since given the expansion of the university campus northward, north of Lewis Street. If there are any specific notions that any of you have and you'd like us to look at, could you let me know ASAP and we could take that into account? We don't have a lot of time to prepare this, but like I told you, I thought that it would make sense for us to have that conversation with you earlier rather than later in the year. So we're going to scramble to get it done by the 9th. So reach out to me, please, if you have any particular ideas you want us to look at.
Thank you. I know council members have had some constituent contact about that too. So if those folks that you've been working with have suggestions for you, then I think you just got the invitation from the city manager to bring some of those things up. Vice Mayor.
yeah, thanks. I don't have anything new to add, but I certainly would really appreciate being reminded of what we did discuss. So I think that may generate some new thoughts after that, but I do need that reminder.
You're talking about with regard to parking?
Right, right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, with that said, and we're not seeing too many more requests for comments or updates. Why don't we just have you guys, have the council, pardon me, take a quick look at the agenda for November 1st. It is not for our council, it's not a particularly substantial agenda, but there are a few things on there.
Councilors, you'll note that item 9L is follow-up from the work session tonight with respect to that letter of support that the Climate Action Coalition asked for. So you will be able to read that in your packet. But we had placed it on the consent agenda thinking it was a pretty pro forma item.
Thank you, and I think we were given some detail on the substance of that tonight. So extra concerns, I said it'll be included in your packet, or extra questions. On the regular agenda, the agenda review meeting, I asked the assistant city manager to talk to me a little bit about third reading amendments for the updates to code for alternative modes of transportation. And he explained that these were largely just generated from some further review and some aspects of our discussion and comment that we received here. You know, normally we like to try to do amendments on second readings, really just because due to workflow, certainly there's never a problem to do amendments on third reading when they come up. So this is an example of it's just some amendments that come up, which we'll talk about in detail at the beach. You might see item number 14 and have some questions raised, and that's simply action that this council needs to take in order to bring our local municipal code and ordinances in compliance with state law around sales of tobacco to people, only to people 21 years of age or older. Used to be 18, now it's 21. Oh, and you'll see also, you know, electronic cigarettes, you know, vaping items, things like that, all kind of included. And the almost reliable item from Public Works about equipment upgrades. Hybrid pickup trucks in this case, related back to tonight's topic. All right, everybody looks like they're feeling okay. They're pretty clear on those things. So, just to review, tell the city clerk if you're available for Wednesday meetings in early November, the first 2 weeks, I guess 3 weeks in November, and contact the city manager with ideas and input you may have heard or have about the parking permit stuff. There was, Vice Mayor, I remember the last time we really had a substantial discussion about this. When I was on council, I think was in 2016, about potential revisions to the parking program, but you may have had some since then. I don't remember, but I believe there was a full meeting work session where we explored a range of things like modification or perhaps doing away with it. And I believe that was in 2016 around the residential parking around campus. If that helps at all, I may go back and see what I can find from that meeting myself.
Yeah, I remember a presentation by Paula, our city manager's former assistant, reaching all the way even north of Harney by a couple blocks and out to potentially 5th or 6th, I think. And that's the one I remember. And I can't remember when that one was. And that's the one I need to really review, because I think, even though I don't think I was supportive of it at the time, because I thought it was too far reaching, now based on all the changes on campus, I actually think it's really close to what we need now. So, but that's just what my memory is, and I could be wrong. But
okay.
And I remember that same thing too. And I've had complaints all the way from within 1 block of the post office of parking
exactly.
too. So that is 6th Street. So yeah, I can see it easily going to 5th Street on that area over there.
Yeah.
And of course, there remain a few of us, at least one that I can think of, that don't agree with that proposal. So, do some homework. I think it was 2016, Council Member Schuster, Vice Mayor Priest. I believe that's when that was. I want to go back and take a look at it too. Anyway, that's good. Do your homework for that, because the city manager asked us to. And I want to say thanks for being here for the work session. It was really interesting. Have a good evening, okay?